T-minus 1 minute. T-minus 50 seconds. T-minus 40 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Right now on Truth Today, we're going to be discussing further the red and green access. The question that I get asked all the time, which one will prevail? We're going to be talking about that. What's the end run? Also, the so-called Palestinian propaganda, the lies of Palestine continue and deceive the world and many Christians. Also, did you know that there was a building in New York City right on Ground Zero that looks like the Kabba? That and much more right now on Truth Today. Well, good afternoon, folks, if you're on East Coast time, and good morning for the rest of you on Central and Pacific time or Mountain time. This is Pastor Sharam Hadian with Truth and Love Ministry. So glad you can join us live in studio. Again, I'm live in studio right here. And first and foremost, my apologies for the delay. We had a technical issue with our email server, and it was not allowing us. It was some issue here in our studio computer. Something updated. You know how these updates are. I hate these mandatory updates that they force you to do. So something in the system updated, and then it was not allowing us access to our own emails and being able to get into the studio and set all this stuff. We takes a while to set up the Rumble and set up StreamYard and set up all this stuff. And anyway, so my apologies for the delay today. And thank you guys for your patience. Glad you can join us live in studio again. A couple of housekeeping items. As always, encourage you, please check out our website, tilministry.com. We will be updating our travel schedule for the fall here very soon on the website, as we are working on events in Minnesota, in Texas, in Rapid City, South Dakota, possibly back in Texas. Actually, not possibly. We'll be in Texas in November again, down in Houston area. So anyway, we'll update that. Also, if you want to contact us, if you want us to come speak in your area, if you want to get our DVDs, our order page, if you want to donate, our donate page is there as well. If you want to support our ministry, thank you ahead of time for that. Also, want to remind you that we are on Rumble and live streaming to Facebook and YouTube. Not sure what's going on with YouTube. Somebody had sent me a message saying they had blocked our show, which I'm not surprised. We didn't. I'm not sure how long we will last on YouTube again after we were kicked off about 3 years ago. But if you go to rumble.com/RobHadian right there on the screen, and please click join, like, and share. 3 things you can do: join, like, and share to help us build our audience up there. Please let us know where you're joining us this morning or this afternoon from. Thank you. We love all of you guys. Welcome from many parts of the country, including in Texas. We got some people joining us from Texas, Washington State, Missouri, Tennessee. Let us know where you are from. Want to remind you that Thursday night, my guest will be Annie Cyrus, former Muslim from Iran. I'm going to be highlighting one of her Substack today. And so I encourage you, if you can join us live in studio, 8 o'clock Eastern time, Thursday night. This will be very, very powerful show. We're going to be talking about prophecy, events that are going on from an Islamic perspective. You heard me right. We're going to be looking at Islamic eschatology, their view of last days. I'm going to put Annie on the spot. It's not necessarily her forte, but we're going to put her on her spot. I'm going to have her comment on some of these things, and hopefully it'll be a good show. So please, again, join us Thursday night, 8 o'clock for Annie and I. And then we have other guests coming next week as well. I wanted to talk about tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern time here locally. If you're in the East Tennessee area, I'm going to be presenting at a East Tennessee conservative group at 6 o'clock. I believe the information's on our website. Again, if you go to tillministry.com/events, it's on our website. And I want to just encourage you, if you guys did not get a chance to watch the show that I did Thursday on constitutional crisis, Islam is not a religion. I just I can't encourage enough, please. This is so important. If we care about America, if you guys care about this nation, if you're praying for America, this is part of my new presentation that I have called Battle for America, Islamic Sabotage and Our Response. And we highlight this red and green axis that I'm going to be talking about this morning or this afternoon. But one of the challenges is, I think, and I still see this, that there seems to be, I don't know if denial is not the right word, but the Bible talks about, and this is a pattern that happened in the Old Testament, that when God was trying to get their attention to the enemies at their gates, to the enemies within their gates, this notion of things are getting better, we're seeing revival. Again, we got to be careful. Not that God is not able or has promised to pour out a spirit in the last days, right? The Bible has promised that God will pour out a spirit in the last days on all flesh. We know there's going to be an outpouring of the Spirit. We know there's going to be a revival of individuals, but I don't necessarily know if there is a promise in the scriptures that there's going to be a revival of these nations. Some nations may stand, many will fall to the Antichrist system. And there seems to be a rejection again, a denial of what is happening, especially within Christianity, within the body of Christ, because we don't understand evil. We don't understand the tactics of the enemy. We don't understand strategy of the enemy, because we are not operating as wise as serpents. Let us be wise as serpents and innocent. Gentle is not the right translation. Innocent as a dove. Because what we are to do is to be above reproach. Don't harbor hate. Don't let bitterness take a hold of you. We don't act like our enemies. We pray for our enemies, but we don't act like our enemies. We don't behave like our enemies. We don't repay evil with evil. But I'm just praying, like, Lord, please wake up people, especially to this very distinct threat that I want to cover. And so the show today is the red-green axis, once again, that I've been highlighting more recently. And again, we highlight in this new presentation. And the question that I get asked all the time between this axis that we'll talk about again as a review is which side is going to win? Will they continue to get along long term, or will one side prevail over the other? And then we're also going to be talking about this so-called Palestinian deception, this propaganda that continues to deceive the world. And so we'll talk about that. But let's just, again, quickly define this red-green axis for all those who maybe haven't heard it, aren't familiar with it, just so we understand what we're dealing with. This axis, again, red and green, right? The red, very simply understood, is isms, socialism, Marxism, and communism. And now you add globalism to the isms of the red. It is a system of government that is against God, that is against Judeo-Christian foundations, because ultimately, if you follow the end run of those systems, they lead to atheism. In fact, that's their so-called state-run religion, is that when you see full-blown communism applied as a government of any nation, you see the end result is ultimately a push for atheism. For example, I remember we did 2 mission trips to Cuba, and Cuba is a country under communism, under Marxism, and Christianity is illegal. It is illegal in Cuba. They tolerate it, but it's illegal officially. And those isms, which are a form of government, are antithetical to our government. They're antithetical to Western laws. They're antithetical to Judeo-Christian foundation. They're antithetical to our constitutional republic. Again, that's why I did the show the other day talking about that we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. And you need to share that with as many people as possible. I specifically went into and made the argument why Islam is not a religion, why it should not be protected under the First Amendment. I went into the details of the apostasy laws of Islam in detail from all of their sources. It has got to be a resource for people to use. But this red-green axis now, we get to the green side of the axis, which is Islam. That's green. That's their color. And the green side of the axis, which, by the way, we've covered this before in Revelation chapter 6, right? If you go to Revelation chapter 6 and you look at the 4th horseman of the seals, right? The fourth seal. I'm going to read it to you here. Here we go. When he opened the 4th seal, I heard a voice of the 4th living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him, and power was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So multiple ways, but the number one way that this power was given was with the sword. Now, why is this important? Because remember, the word there in the Greek for pale is the Greek word chloros, and it doesn't mean pale. Pale is not a good translation. The word is green. Chloros, which is where we get the word chlorine from, in its powder, in its original state, in its powder form, is green. And so it really should be the green horse, and the green horse name was death. So this horse carries with it a spirit of death. And I'm telling you, folks, there has been no greater spirit of death on the planet, and I'll show you that here today, than the green, Islam. It is the greatest death cult in human history. It is the greatest antichrist spirit that has prevailed for 1400 years in human history. And how are a quarter of the world's population going to be killed? With the sword. They're going to be killed with the sword. And so as we get closer and closer and closer to the establishment of this beast system on the planet, the establishment of one world government, one world economy, and one world religion, which again, if you get our copy of our One World Religion Rising, I don't think I have an image of it here, but it's on our website. I cover the rise of this one world religion, how Islam is central to that one world religion. I believe Islam will be the chosen religion of the globalists in the sense of using it as their battering ram, using it as their foot soldiers, using it. But the question is, when you have the red, again, socialism, Marxism, communism, and globalism now, and you have the green, the question always comes down, which one will prevail? Which side is going to prevail? And that's what I want to address. But also, watch this. The four colors of the four horsemen, the first four seals, the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the green horse. Ironically, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence, and I've covered this before, ironically, those are the four colors of the so-called Palestinian flag. And this idea, this is a show that I did back a few weeks ago on Islam, how Islam curses Christians and Jews, and there's no common ground, there's no getting along. It is a curse. And look at the four colors of the Palestinian flag: white, red, black, green. It should tell you what the spirit is behind this movement, this Palestinian lie that has captured the world, where people cannot think straight, they cannot reason, they are buying into all the propaganda, including the propaganda that everybody in Gaza is being starved. And yet the scripture is telling us what the spirit is behind this. I believe the Palestinian lie is part of this spirit. Now, I'm not saying that the seals have been broken. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, because we're not yet in the tribulation period, in my opinion, but we're getting very close. And everything is lining up for this global system, total control, Agenda 2030. By the year 2030, they are claiming that they are getting ready. So, I want to lay out for you this this scenario. Here is the article by my friend Annie Cyrus, who's going to be with us on Thursday night. And the red-green axis is not equal. All right. So I encourage you, if you go to her Substack, you can read this. And I'm going to highlight some of this. I'm going to share it with you here on the screen. Let me just do this real quick. And we're going to cover right here. And I'm going to show you some of the article, some of the things that she's covering here. All right. Now, she talks a little bit about the red-green axis. I've explained some of it to you. And, but here is the conversation about the alliance of convenience, right? The alliance of convenience. Let me just go a little bit bigger here for you so you guys can see this. The alliance of convenience, all right? And you get to this part here where she's talking about the graveyard they built, the graveyards they built. So she makes a good point here, excuse me, that the red side of the axis is used to tear down. They use socialism, Marxism, communism to tear down. Words like oppression, equity, decolonization, social justice, right? So Marxism brings the language. Marxism brings the anti-Western hatred, revisionism, anti-capitalism. But yet, you notice that the Marxists, the red, will never criticize the green. Good point here. Feminists scream about toxic masculinity until the hijab walks in. So the feminists, the LGBT activists demand safe spaces. They call for, getting rid of toxic masculinity. They've neutered men. And what happens is, we're going to come back to that in a minute. Now, they don't criticize the green. This, I said to you, this is the same thing that happened in Iran when the communists had infiltrated Iran from the 1940s. There was a communist underpinning in Iran up until the overthrow of the government, the coup. And a lot of that work, a lot of the groups that, by the way, she talks about in this article, she highlights some of those, a lot of those groups that were advocating for social justice and the idea of free education and free this and getting rid of capitalism and the Shah is bad and the Shah is a puppet of America and all these things. They were focusing, folks, on the notion that this was destroying. The red comes in and tears down. The red comes in and destroys. The green then comes in, to her point, and now brings the solution. They use the green as the solution. Let's tear down Iran. Let's tear down everything that was being done. Now we bring in an Islamic so-called revolution under the green, the banner of green. And now this is supposed to be better, right? Yet the very first people that are going to be on the chopping block, the very first people that are the fools in this movement, as the communists use the term, the useful idiots. The useful idiots. The very first people that are on the chopping block are the LGBTQ feminists. You know, what we see this now with Queers for Palestine and LGBT rights for Palestine. We see this with the support of people like Mamdani, right? Zohran Mamdani in New York. And now Omar Fateh in Minneapolis. You see this, that they are supporting these people. And I gave you the example of the bar in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, when I talked about that Thursday night, that supported the Islamic call of prayer in that neighborhood in downtown Minneapolis. They were petitioning, a bar that had been there for 119 years was petitioning the city to allow the Muslims to do their prayer. It's beautiful. It's good. Now, as the Muslims have taken over that entire area of downtown Minneapolis, they bought out the bar. The mosque bought the bar, got the money, but no more bar. Those people are out of a job. Talk about useful idiots. So this red and green access, the red destroys. The red comes in as the battering ram to tear down. They deconstruct, just like people are trying to deconstruct Christianity, right? We've seen in the churches socialism, Marxism, social justice, all of that destroys true biblical Christianity. It deconstructs. Now they come in, and what comes in to take its place? Oh, now you got to bring the green in, and the green, folks, has a God, and the green has, quote, a faith. And so now under the green, they hide behind this, and they take over. They take over. And her article, again here, her article is talking about how they take over, this alliance of convenience. And, sorry, let me come back to me here. So now, watch this. When we go to the article, I'm going to show you, she talks about the death toll, the graveyard they built. Both are totalitarian systems. This is a really good point. They are both totalitarian. They both crush dissent, and they both turned entire nations into graveyards. Marxism killed over 100 million people in a single country. It isn't a metaphor. It's documented genocide dressed up as a revolution. So you see, she goes down. Soviet Union, 1920s, 1950s, swallowed millions of priests, poets, intellectuals. Ukraine, 32 to 33, Stalin engineered the Holodomor, man-made famine, starved millions. China, Mao's Great Leap Forward. Cambodia under Pol Pot, speaking French and wearing glasses could brand you a bourgeois threat. 2 million were executed. In the USSR, churches were burned to the ground, parents dragged away, children were trained to spy and report on their own families. Truth didn't exist. It was whatever the regime said that day, and if you disagreed, disappear. So excellent point. So look at it. Marxism estimated global death toll between mid-19th century and 21st century, 100 to 110 million plus deaths. And there she sources the Black Book of Communism. And she breaks down the numbers there. 1848 European revolutions, Paris, USSR, China's Mao, Cambodia, Pol Pot, North Korea, present to the present time, Vietnam, Ethiopia, Eastern Europe, Cuba, Venezuela, DPRK, all of this leading to the death toll that we see, leaving death in its path. Now, remember, what did we say was the hallmark of this movement, right? It's a spirit of death. It's a spirit of death. The white horse is the false Christ. It's the Antichrist. The red horse brings war. The black horse brings famine, starvation, pestilence. The green horse brings death. And first source of death is through the sword, through fighting. And who uses the sword, folks? Who has used the sword and beheaded more people than Islam, than the green? Nobody. Nobody in human history has killed more people through the sword than Islam. In fact, the verses of the Bible, wrong. Forgive me, Lord. The verses of the demonic Quran, strike their neck by the sword, strike their neck, kill them wherever you find them. It talks about, it's in fact, these latter verses, the abrogated verses in the Quran are called the verses of the sword. 100 verses in the abrogation calling for violence against Jews and Christians They're called verses of the sword. And now, going back to the article, she talks about then the death toll. We're going to keep going here. Watch this. The death toll now of Islam. Islam, however, never needed Marx to invent tyranny. It has Muhammad, the perfect man, with a sword instead of a manifesto. Remember Thursday, I covered the Ridda Wars, the initial apostasy wars, where they went after and killed 30 to 40, or some numbers say 40 to 50,000 apostates. Somewhere between 30 and 50,000 of those who had left Islam after Muhammad died. Turkey, India, Persia. Now watch this, Iran. Look at these numbers. Here we go. Remember, it was 100 to 110 million? Well, according to my good friend, Dr. Bill Warner, who lives here in Tennessee, and he's an expert on Islamic warfare. Look at this. Islam's estimated global death toll from the 7th century to now, 270 to 300 million people killed. India, 80 million. Africa, 20 to 30 million. Middle East and Persia, 15 to 20 million. Europe, 10 to 15 million. Southeast Asia, 2 to 5 million, and ongoing. This has been a nonstop bloodbath. Communism calls it class warfare. Islam calls it blasphemy. The result is the same. Your rights are revoked, your voice is erased, and your life is expendable. And yet, listen, and yet only one ideology promises to punish you after you die. The axis is not built to last. The Red-Green Alliance works only because they hate the same target. But once the statues are toppled, the books are burned, and the churches are emptied, only one side has a plan for what comes next, and it doesn't involve tolerance, diversity, or dialectal materialism. And then she goes through and talks about the communist parties that were in Iran that I was mentioning earlier, and how they were all arrested and jailed and executed, many of them leaders of these groups in Iran. Now, I've told you the story before. I've told you the story before that my cousin was one of these useful idiots, where before the overthrow of the Shah, he was out there protesting and down with the Shah and down with the dictatorship and bring a new system. And they were fully into socialism and communism. And then the Islamic coup happened, the so-called revolution. And within 6 months, this fool, this young man, became an enemy of the Islamic Republic. He was blacklisted. My cousin, sorry, this was my cousin's husband, so cousin by birth. My actual cousin, she was married to this fool. She was pregnant at the time when the Basij that was set up by the Islamic Republic, the morality police, showed up at her apartment, guns drawn on her as a pregnant woman, looking for him because they were rounding up all these dissidents and arresting them, putting them on trial, and many were executed. I have no doubt that he would have been executed. But a neighbor who saw them come up to the apartment was looking for him. And when he showed up, when he drove up, the neighbor ran and told them, "You got to go now, get out. They're up there to arrest you. Leave." So he leaves, goes into hiding. He never went back to his house one time. He went under hiding, and my uncle had to pay somewhere in the equivalency of $25,000 to have him smuggled out of the country to Turkey, because he's now on a hit list, on a blacklist. So the red and green will not last. This access will not last. And we have to understand that where we see right now them working together and building their army, the bottom line is the green prevails. The green will win out. And I covered this before right here when I told you that one of the things that you see is the Muslims are bragging that they're bringing the Marxists to Islam. Join us as we hear from former Marxists, look at that, who chose Islam. Join us as we hear from two former Marxists, Rahim Ocasio and Jihad Abdul Muhammad. Both were Marxists, formerly affiliated. You see their Young Lords Party, Black Panther Party. Now they've converted to Islam. They are devout, fundamentalist Muslims. And to the point of her article, they will not last. This access does not last. The green will kill the red. Islam doesn't negotiate, it tolerates until it doesn't. Marxism is the match, Islam is the wildfire. One feels destruction, the other claims a territory. The red thinks it's found a partner, the green knows it's found a vehicle. Well said. And then she talks about Islam gets a free pass. In these pro-Marxist nations, they never criticize Muhammad. They never criticize. So that's why you see the mess in Western Europe, because what you see is that when you go to socialist Marxist countries, when you go to all these socialist countries, what happens? They use the underpinning of the red. Islam comes in, the battering ram, they take over. Now, do you see the governments of France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, Austria, all these socialist countries, do you see them criticizing the Muslims? No, they will protect Islam. They will pass laws to come against the Christians, the freedom fighters, the patriots, like you see in the UK now. I said on the show on Thursday, right? They arrest the very people that are trying to protect the nation. We become the enemy because this allegiance will not last. This allegiance is a deception. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe it is a spiritual deception with this whole Palestinian thing, which we'll get to in a minute, because the four colors of that flag, I do not believe it's an accident that those colors match exactly the colors of the four horsemen of the Revelation 6 seals. It is the same spirit, the Antichrist spirit, a spirit of war, a spirit of famine, pestilence, and a spirit of death. All of it encompassed in this red-green axis, and all of it encompassed within the death cult, which is Islam. Remember, for Muslims, the highest goal that a Muslim has is to die for the sake of Allah in jihad, in warfare. That warfare is to establish the religion. By the way, again, remember we covered on Thursday the most authoritative book on Sharia other than outside the Quran and the Hadith. And in the section we talked about, remember we talked about what jihad, what the apostasy laws were. Well, in section 0.9, it defines the word jihad. So don't take anybody's word for it. Oh, jihad is just an internal spiritual struggle. Listen to what this authoritative book on Islamic law says jihad is. Jihad means to war against non-Muslims and is etymologically derived from the word mujahada, like we've heard the word mujahideen, signifying warfare to establish the religion. Warfare to establish the religion of what religion? That is Islam. Now, it says it is the lesser jihad. Why is it lesser? Because it will end. They believe it will eventually end because there will no longer be anybody fighting Islam because Islam will conquer the world. And as we're going to cover on our show on Thursday, you're going to see they believe Jesus will come back to rule the caliphate from Jerusalem as the king, Jesus the king, but ruling he's going to be the king of Islam. He's going to be the king of the Islamic caliphate. And you're going to hear their own words, folks, not mine. So, what is the problem? The problem is these useful idiot leftists and the useful idiots in the church that are fueling and condoning and covering for Islam, like James White, the so-called apologist, well, he's supposed to be an apologist for Christianity, but really he's become an apologist for Islam. And these people are the fools. These people are the ones who are carrying the water, whether they know it or not. They are the ones who are destroying and creating the havoc. And what does Islam do when it takes over, right? Islam continues to conquer. I covered this, right? Establishing enclaves for the upper house, right? New York Muslims have a new security patrol, the Muslim community patrols. Let's give them their own cars, their own uniforms. We're going to let them patrol their own areas and establish what they will then term as Sharia patrols, right? We covered that. But let me get into the other thing that happens. This was an interesting article from the Geller report, the Kabba at ground zero. The Kabba at ground zero. So you see in that picture there, they have the two footprints of the Twin Towers there. Well, right next to it, you see that cube-shaped building? There are people that are saying that because they're saying that was built by the Ground Zero Mosque. They wanted to build a mosque there. Do you guys remember that? You guys remember that after 9/11? We're going to have a Ground Zero Mosque. It's going to be an Islamic center, 13 floors. We can all coexist. Well, now they're saying this article, if you go to Geller Report, is saying that cube building is representative of the Kaaba. So 2009, there was a plan to reconstruct the mosque at Ground Zero. I'm sorry, it was supposed to be 16-story mega mosque at the principal site of the 9/11 attacks, which, by the way, that's a sign of Islamic supremacy, because where they conquer, where they attack, where they have defeated, then they are to put a mosque there, just like they did on the Temple Mount, right? Jerusalem is not in the Quran. It is the word itself is not there. They call it Beitul Maqdes, which just means holy mountain. The word Jerusalem is not in the Quran, not one time. And as such, when they conquered Jerusalem, Islam conquered Jerusalem, they established on the Temple Mount the Al-Aqsa Mosque, that gray black dome mosque. Of course, they took over the Dome of the Rock, which was a Byzantine structure, and they turned it into a mosque. But this object is very interesting. There's a Kaaba-shaped building, the strangely named Perelman Center, which opened on September 13, 2023. The building does bear a striking resemblance to the cube-shaped building in Mecca that Muslims circumambulate during their required pilgrimage to that city. Those who would discount the fact that the building is also tilted at an angle to its surroundings so that one corner points directly towards Mecca on the grounds that virtually every four-cornered building is likely to have one corner pointing somewhere towards Mecca, have not paid sufficient attention to aerial photographs, showing that the building is oddly skewed off its foundation as if its designers meant for it to point in a particular direction. When the Perelman Center opened, the Perelman Center, it's not Perelman Center, the New York Times architectural critic Michael Kimmelman called it the most glamorous civic building to land in New York in years, as well as a retort to terrorism. He refers to the building as a, quote, mystery box. Anyway, encourage you to read that article, but here it is again. There it is again. You see that cube-shaped building there, right next to Ground Zero, that looks a lot like the Kaaba. But when they take over areas like they do in Minnesota, then they begin their destruction. Remember, we talked about Sharia crimes. We talked about increased gang violence, increased sexual assaults. And now you have a society like in Minnesota where the government is covering up for Muslims, or they downplay. The latest sickening event is this monster, this Islamic degenerate. Minnesota Islamic Center pleads for leniency for Muslim migrant who kidnapped and raped a 12-year-old. Quote, he has the challenge of starting over in a new culture. So why did he rape this young girl? Because, he was struggling to start a new culture. And here is the Al-Insan Islamic Center in St. Paul, Minnesota, that is writing a letter on behalf of this Islamic degenerate. And that's also on the Geller report. Minnesota Islamic Center writes a letter of support to ask the judge to go easy on a convicted Somalian child rapist because of the, quote, challenge of starting over in a new culture. You cannot make this up. Meanwhile, in the Congress, 158 Democrats in the House voted not to deport illegals who are convicted of sexual crimes, especially on minors. We are seeing children raped in this country, trafficked, and these deviants that are from other countries, particularly Islamic countries, where they condone raping of non-Muslims. Islam condones and allows the raping of non-Muslims. It is not considered rape. And so when you now, yes, he was charged for 12 years after being convicted of first-degree criminal sexual assault. He will get 65 days of credit for his sentence, and conditional release after confinement has been set at 10 years. He was arrested back in 2024 after Minneapolis police were called to the hospital for a criminal sexual conduct report on June 10th. According to a then 12-year-old girl, she was playing in her backyard in Minneapolis on June 5th when a man later identified as Deary, this is Ibrahim Deary, approached her asking if her mom was home. The girl told him no, and Deary reportedly left the house, only to return around 10 minutes later, grabbed the girl, forced her into her car, where he raped her. I mean, this is sick. And this is the culture we get. This is what happens when we import this red-green access into our cities. And yet, the world continues to not pay attention to most of this. And all they pay attention to is this Palestinian lie, this Palestinian myth. And if you know me and you know our ministry, folks, we have covered for you in depth the myth of Palestine. No Christian who is reading their Bible, who is understanding their Bible and seeks truth, should be claiming that there is a Palestine. There never has been a Palestine. There's never been a Palestinian people. There's never been a Palestinian country. There's never been a Palestinian language. There's never been a Palestinian capital. And yet the world continues to fall, in my opinion, to this antichrist deception. Again, coincidence that their so-called flag that is made up has the four colors of the four horsemen? You could say it's a coincidence. I don't believe it is a coincidence. And in our DVD, Israel is Not Replaced, we go through this myth. We talk about that it was made up. We talk about that it was a Roman emperor concept as a curse to the Jews when they were expelled from Jerusalem under the curse of Hadrian. I have statements from so-called Palestinian leaders themselves, including Yasser Arafat, that there's never been such a thing as Palestine. It does not exist. It's a figment of their imagination. Yet, what does the world continue to do? Continue to go through their propaganda. And yet it's sickening. It's sickening that they are not, nobody will condemn this, right? Nobody is condemning Hamas showing the video of this Israeli hostage. It's Avatar David, who has been in captivity now, where if you go to the article, let me go to the article here real quick to share this with you. It is grieving. Here's the article. And if you scroll down, you can see that there's a here, right here. See this? New York Times. This is what the New York Times front page should look like today, but it won't. They made this up here claiming Israeli hostage starved in Gaza. But what is the world talking about? How Israel is starving the Gazans. Israel is starving the Gazans. And yes, there are problems with getting food into Gaza. But where are all these Arab nations? Again, I asked that question. But clips of Avatar David and Rom Brislavsky, both abducted during October 7th, coming up on almost 2 years this October. Circulated online. And I'll play this video for you in a minute here, where he's shown digging a hole potentially for his own grave. Can you imagine that? And here is just this, let's go to this 20-second video here, and I'll show you this. Speaking of this propaganda, look at this. Here's this vile video. I don't know if there's audio. Oh, there's audio.
מה שאני עושה עכשיו, אני חופר את הקבר. הקבר שמיד מבחינתי לי. כי כל יום שעובר הגוף שלי הולך, נחלש, נהיה רזה יותר וחלש יותר.
Oh, so grieving. So grieving. Digging his own grave. Digging his own grave. And meanwhile, the world continues to acknowledge, claim that it is that it is Israel that is starving. And it just, there's so many articles, and then there's one down there. If you go to the article, I want you to show you this. Show you this here. Let me show you this real quick. You got to see this. This should make you a bit mad. Let me go down here. Look at this one. Look at this one. Look at this one. Let me see if this will come up here. No, it didn't open up. You know what? I can do it here. 1 second, folks. Sorry. Let me go to this. Hang on with me here. Right here. Look at this. Look at this. The terrorist feast. Those are members of Hamas sitting in their tunnels, right? With their laptops, with their food. They all look healthy, plump. And meanwhile, they're starving an Israeli hostage that has been there for how long? And all the world buys into is the propaganda. And did you see this map? Look at this map. Look at the countries now that have recognized a so-called Palestinian state. Most countries in Asia, Africa, and South America have recognized. Canada plans to recognize. France plans to recognize. The UK plans to recognize. These European nations are already recognizing. Spain already recognizes Africa, China, Middle East. These are all the green that you see there are all the countries that have already recognized that there is indeed a Palestine. You talk about an end times delusion, an end times deception, where these are simply Arabs and they're simply Arabs. And I'm going to try to get our friend Aaron Lavarca on the show next week and have him give us an update on what's going on with this propaganda. And I want to hear his comments and what's going on in Israel with regards to all these nations jumping on board and recognizing that we need to have a Palestinian state and that therefore there needs to be a two-state solution, which we know, if you know anything about this red-green axis, you know it is impossible. There is no two-state solution, folks. Palestine is a myth. It's a spiritual myth. It's a deception. And now the world is enamored, and many, many Christians are enamored with the lie. With the lie. Now, please hear my heart. I am not giving a green pass to everything the Israeli government does. When they've done wrong, we criticize it. And I've tried to fairly criticize when they've done wrong. But you also got to know when you're being played. You also got to know the narrative. And the narrative of first it was genocide, right? There's genocide. But the population in Gaza keeps growing. So that doesn't fit the bill. And then the world won't cover the genocide that is happening in Syria. The ethnic cleansing that is happening in Syria to the Druze, to the Alawites, to the Christians. But they'll talk about, quote, genocide in Gaza. Well, that's kind of falling apart. So now it's starvation. And if you know anything about that one New York Times article they ran with the person holding that child where the back was all, skewed and bent and starved. And then later it came out they had to do a retraction because that was a false story. That child had nothing to do with starvation in Gaza. That child had a birth defect. And so I'm telling you folks, the majority of this is propaganda. You got to pray for discernment to see through this. And also pray that we will not bail on support of Israel as God's people and as God's promises. Again, the Lord has brought them back. That's why I want to encourage you. If you have not, get our DVD, Israel is Not Replaced, Understanding God's Heart and Promises for Israel, because it is all about God's word and God's promises. It is not about condoning everything the Israeli government does. I have been as critical of them as I've been of our government in many, many instances, but it is about standing on God's word, standing on God's promises, standing on God's prophecy, and not falling for a spiritual deception that there's such a thing as Palestinians, such a thing as a Palestinian language or country or capital. Never existed, never will. It is a figment of a demonic imagination, and it is deceiving billions of people. Billions of people. And yes, do I think the war should end? Yes. I think Israel should finish this. I don't know how else they're going to do it other than to occupy Gaza, because Hamas will not leave, because jihad will not leave. You understand? Hamas will never leave the mind and the hearts of the Arabs. That's what they are, right? Arabs that are living in Gaza, because jihad will never leave the hearts and minds of Muslims. Because jihad and their warfare against Jews, against Christians, against anybody to make Islam be the world's religion, which again, Thursday night with Annie Cyrus, 8 o'clock Eastern, we're going to talk about Islamic eschatology and what they believe. And you will see 100% it is the opposite of the Bible's eschatology. It is the Antichrist spirit. I still believe the Antichrist is going to come out of the Islamic world. Meanwhile, it is taking over America, taking over the West. It is absolutely dismantling us by this red-green axis. But it won't last. The axis won't last. Islam will prevail for a short time. Now, here's the final good news. The final good news is that Islam will not prevail because the King of Kings will prevail. The Lord of Lords will prevail. Jesus is coming back to rule from Jerusalem, but he's not ruling a caliphate. He's not ruling an Islamic world order. He's going to destroy Islam. He's going to destroy the armies of the Antichrist. He's going to destroy every ideology, and he's setting up his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Praise God. Hallelujah. That's our hope. That's what we long for. And we're going to continue to fight for the kingdom to come and be salt and be light and make sure that we are occupying and representing him. Folks, I thank you for today. Share this show with somebody. Again, I want to encourage you, visit our website, tillministry.com. Check out our events calendar. You want us to come speak in your area, please contact us. If you just get a venue, some group, Lord willing, we can try to come into your area. Also, please prayerfully consider donating to this ministry, a one-time donation, either by check or online. Our P.O. box is there. We are really trying to get ahead for this third quarter. We're praying for about another $8,500, $9,000 to come in to really put us ahead. We've been just barely making it by, but praise God. God is faithful. He got us through. Thank you for all of you who donated. Thank you for all of you who supported. Thank you for all of you who prayed for us. You guys are amazing. We love you. We bless you. We honor you, our Gideon army. But please remember, folks, that just keep praying for us. But if you're able to support us, we are grateful for that. You can make a one-time donation. Also, remember, we're going to Israel next May, Lord willing, with our friend Aaron Lavarco as our guide. It'll be phenomenal. Please pray about coming with us. Would you pray about coming with us? Once in a lifetime trip, May 11th to the 21st, 2026, Lord willing. Go and get more information on the trip there. This is Pastor Shahram Hadian. Again, I'll be with you Thursday night, Lord willing, 8 o'clock Eastern, with my guest, Annie Cyrus. It will be a must-watch show. Folks, get the word out. And folks in East Tennessee, I will see you tonight for Battle for America. By the way, we recorded this, and we'll be getting this out on some sort of a social media platform, but also on flash drives and possibly on DVDs here soon. We're going to get it out to you, make it available to you guys. Battle for America is going on. God bless you guys. Please have a great rest of your week. We'll see you Thursday night on Truth Today. Pastor Shahram Hadian. God bless.